And it's understanding the trade area is critical to assessing a given downtown's true retail potential. And so what we did, looked at a number of factors that typically influence trade area, access, visibility, parking, all of that. And also we looked at the competition, the regional competition. The Elcon malls, the Park Place, Tucson Mall, Southgate, all of these different kinds of competitors, more mass market sort of commodified competitors, big box centers, enclosed malls. And based on that, we estimated from how far downtown could likely pull. And then we looked at the demographics within those boundaries. And as you can see, it's not a large population. We're playing with a little over 40,000 people. Roughly an estimated 40 to 50% of those are students. No surprise to you, students predominate, and so that is a large component. Also a large component, lower income Latinos, the Latino population concentrated to the south and to the west. And so those are the two kind of bulges in the market. And then we also have this smaller but still significant concentration of what I would call hipsters. You might be familiar with that term. That refers to creatively inclined, alternatively minded people who are often drawn to places most of us ignore or avoid. And so they are often ones that jumpstart revitalization of forlorn places and business districts. And from what I could tell, they played a critical role in that here as well in the early days of downtown's resurgence. And you see this population expressed perhaps no more clearly than on 4th Avenue. You are all familiar with the funky character of that business district. And so it includes any manner of artists, musicians, baristas, bartenders, aging hippies, other assorted bohemians. That is clearly here in downtown. Now, we saw on our tour on Monday a number of in-town neighborhoods where property values have increased. But just for a frame of reference here, looking at this 42,135 people, we're still overwhelmingly a lower income sort of demographic. Only 1,700 households make over $75,000 a year as compared to 8,200 that make below 25,000. So we need to keep that in mind. Especially in comparison to the Tucson Metro, we're still dealing with a modest demographic. And part of that is students, college towns always have much lower median household incomes just because they're students. And that's not necessarily a reflection of their true spending habits, as we all know. But that being the case, people who tell me students don't spend money, you know how much iPhones cost and $4 lattes, and they spend money on things that are important to them, and that means something to them. So there is spending power there. But just as a frame of reference, we are dealing with a somewhat modest demographic. Okay, so as you know, downtown is not only about the people who live within this trade area. There are other what we call traffic drivers that bring potential customers downtown, and in Tucson's case, these are critical. Of course, daytime workers, we estimated about 27,000, not a bad number, 18,000 of which is public sector workers from 4 different levels of government. As Alan told you, the corporate presence is muted here in downtown. And then what I call destination traffic. These are people, they don't live in downtown or live in or near downtown. They don't work in downtown necessarily, and they don't study in downtown necessarily, but they come to downtown because of certain destination uses and activities. And you see this most clearly in the realm of high culture, we were very impressed with the annual patronage of a number of your performing arts venues and museums, many of which are drawing 100,000, 200,000 people a year. Those are very good numbers. And of course, upmarket restaurants as well, of which only the best example, only the clearest example is Janos and Downtown Kitchen. But there are others, and there will be more. Pizzeria Bianco, an important one, which I'll say more about in a minute. But the point here is that a lot of these high culture sort of attractions, they really draw a very well-educated, relatively well-off, and typically older consumer. And that's driving quite a bit in downtown. I would call this group of people not hipsters, but yupsters. These are people who, they might be well-off, well-established empty nesters living in the Catalina foothills or elsewhere. They might be upwardly mobile young professionals. They are not starving artists. However, they retain some of the creative and alternative sensibilities of hipsters. So they are very artsy, and they do go to theater performances, and they are foodies, and they do go to gourmet restaurants. There's a lot of that here in downtown Tucson, and that's really driving the retail mix. And some of those people live within the trade area, don't get me wrong, but a large percentage also live beyond it. And these attractions have been able to pull them in, even though they don't have any other particular business here. Okay, so so that's kind of an overview of the submarkets that we are, as they say, playing with here in downtown Tucson. Going forward, there is some concern about the possibility of supply of restaurants and other sorts of businesses outpacing demand, coming too early in the curve, as it were. Partly the concern is based on the fact that a lot of these restaurants and bars seem to be targeting a similar customer, and there is at some point a ceiling to that demand. Also with comparison goods, the clothing, the shoes, the jewelry, things like that, we're up against some really formidable competition. Those sorts of categories, people tend to like shopping for clothing, shoes, jewelry, where they can comparison shop, hence the name comparison goods. And obviously the selection is far greater at your regional malls, at your big box centers, even on 4th Avenue and Main Gate. So, you know, that's the reason for concern there. But that said, I think there are clear directions where we could take this with the appropriate amount of caution. The dominating theme with all of this is that rather than thinking of retail in terms of kind of big splash, big bang projects or retailers, think about it in a smaller scale, incremental sort of way. Because if you look at what's been successful thus far, it isn't just one big anchor retailer. It's a number of smaller concepts that together aggregate to something much bigger. And that's often how downtown retail revitalization happens. In certain cases you will have a big splash project. Much more often you are seeing it happen along these more organic incremental lines. With that said, some modestly sized anchors on the order of 8,000 to 12,000 square feet, there's a number of possibilities. Incidentally, just not to get too excited, that's a Barnes & Noble college bookstore there. And that will be, that we hope will be possible with some of the university-oriented recommendations that you'll hear more about later. Incremental additions to the comparison goods mix. Obviously, you have some successes. Hydra has been here for 19 years, looking for a second location now. Buffalo Exchange, obviously a Tucson-born brand, has been very successful nationwide, but they opened a new location on Congress in 2011. You have some strengths to work with, and those are the niches which probably have the greatest chance in downtown. Wider range of eateries and entertainment. As I said, we have a lot of very good restaurants, but targeting a similar customer. and there are ways of broadening that. Same with the entertainment. Quick service food and drink, particularly closer to the worker concentration. Obviously, we have limited amount of time for lunch. I understand county workers have only a half hour, so those offerings need to be fast and need to be close. And then finally, a properly scaled Mercado Central. I hope we have the right name for it. That's a very exciting idea. I applaud the idea of the notion of a larger sort of mercado that can attain some level of what they call critical mass, can really have a size and a scale that stands out in the marketplace. I caution against too much square footage for a couple of reasons. One, you really need some sort of large-scale traffic generator to provide a sizable pool of potential customers for that mercado. And secondly, it does need, as successful as some of these more high-end artisan eateries have been, it does need to be affordably priced to have a sort of broad appeal that it would need to be sustainable. But that said, it is a very, very exciting concept. And what kinds of operators? Well, there are every so often the larger chain that is willing to open, even pioneer in downtown settings. You have a couple of them, obviously Buffalo Exchange, World of Beer. But for the most part, what I think is the most realistic for the near term is what I would call chain-lets. These are not chains, nor are they mom and pops. They are operators that maybe have 2 or 3 locations, either locally or in the region or even nationally, all right? And these offer kind of a perfect blend, if you will, of local distinctiveness. They're not ubiquitous. You'll go to Washington, D.C. or Seattle, Washington, you won't see them. But at the same time, they have some track record that a landlord and a lender can be a little bit more comfortable with. I think that's probably what's most realistic, and it is this kind of happy balance. And in fact, most of the arrivals in the last several years along Congress have been precisely these sorts of operators. Richard, I'm sorry if I mispronounce any of these names, Richard Osserman, Cade Mislinski, Travis Reese, Ari Shapiro, Derek Woodmark, and of course the coming of Pizzeria Bianco, which I've had in Phoenix, and as a New Yorker, I have to say that is some damn good pizza, and that's opening. That's opening on Congress Street. Those sorts of operators, and they're really kind of the sweet spot. From a locational point of view, as Alan had suggested, we really think, except for the Mercado Central and maybe a few quick service food and drink offerings, we should really concentrate, at least for retail, east of Church Street. Retail in downtown settings, it typically moves in an iterative fashion, radiating from existing cores of strength. All right? You don't want to have a core of strength here and then build an entirely new center of gravity here. Not with a somewhat limited and fragile market. You really want to concentrate and cluster. And you have a clear cluster on East Congress built from that. Ultimately, it will reach the rest of downtown and beyond. But it has to move in kind of a fluid sort of way from that existing base of strength. So with that being the case, continuing west along Congress, that's just the first of many amazing renderings you'll see from our panelist, Peter, of what could happen with the Ronstadt Transit Center. The Transit Center itself, and I cleared this with our transportation expert, Ross, the Transit Center itself would remain in its current place and even in its current design, but there is seemingly some space at the frontage of Congress Street for some retail bays that can kind of provide some continuity heading west from the existing core of strength. And also, to some extent, Broadway Boulevard. We've already seen some activity there. And while it's not as walkable of an environment, there is the visibility from the automobile traffic that it gets as a one-way eastbound road. Final slide, talking about that concern we had earlier about supply outpacing demand. In order to mitigate that risk, and in order to keep moving and growing as a downtown, there's 2 very important in fact, critical non-retail principles, I guess, that need to be embraced. One, increasing residential densities. Because we only have 42,000 people, because our access to the east is a bit challenged with no freeway, density drops precipitously to the west. For these reasons, we really need to build the residential densities within the trade area. There's a trade-off here. Yes, we like our views of the mountains, and it is indeed a gorgeous setting. But at the same time, if we want a vibrant and sustainable and growing downtown retail base, we do need density. Density where appropriate, for instance, along the streetcar line. And then finally, to continue to supplement that with more destination traffic, even more destination uses and activities, some of which will be discussed by my fellow panelists in the rest of the presentation. So these are two ways we could keep, retain, and grow the size of our draw here for downtown retail. Next, I am going to cede the floor to a gentleman I've had a great pleasure working with this week, Charlie Johnson, from the great state of Illinois. And he is going to talk about hospitality uses, convention centers, all that good stuff. So,
thank you, Michael.
Yes.
So I get the fun stuff. My job is to help live within the boundaries of the reality that were created by the economists regarding retail and traditional real estate, and form a way to make downtown more interesting and bring more volume in to the market. So if we could actually help create value for the real estate and maybe even create certain bumps in terms of the retail acceleration and capture rate of the marketplace. We have 50,000 Mexicans crossing the border every day. How could we get them to come to the downtown in this area? And you have a rich culture, you have a rich heritage, and so you really, as a community, in the special events market already, with the convention center, with all the other activities that happen, either organically or through programming and promotion by the city and the county and other bodies that are in the community. So you really have quite an opportunity to brand. When you think of San Antonio, you have a very clear understanding of what's there. When you think of other markets, you have a clear understanding. And you have the character in this market to offer the same type of brand. And that's what I think needs to be accentuated over the next couple decades, but starting very quickly with some strategic projects. Obviously, the mixed uses as it comes and grows helps, but the tourist-related uses as well. And then the public space and the undeveloped public land on the southwest landfill sites really allow you to capture the heritage of this market and help facilitate creating your brand. First of all is the TCC itself. It has a checkered history in the community. We see the light system. There are some improvements that need to be added to the facility, but additional capacity does exist. Tucson and Greater Tucson does do a tremendous amount of group meeting activity. We worked with the Visit Tucson and estimated that approximately 700,000 group room nights attend this market today. Most happen in the resorts. How do you bring them down to the convention, the central business district? But when you look at the actual number of events in the exhibit hall, there's only 67 events. And if you look at that, 20 of them are probably single day, single hall activities. Tremendous amount of extra capacity in that venue. And I think it could be exploited. One must agree that the TCC is actually a very important amenity to the community. In fact, it serves almost a 500,000 people every year, not including the demand that occurs at the theaters. So it's a big activity generator, but how can we use that more effectively to create demand? We have some suggestions in that regard regarding the current users. Do more of what you're doing now. We think that the gym show obviously is a very important user, and the social, military, educational, religious, and fraternal and ethnic fit this market. They're less sensitive to quality, not that you don't have quality, but the facility itself has limitations. And so we need to recognize those, and that's probably the demand category, and a lot more drive-in capabilities to given your lift capacity. Also, trade and consumer shows, and the Visit Tucson just hired a sports professional to try to bring more tournaments to the market. Makes sense in the TCC itself. Also, there are potential to use this facility more for local use. And so sporting events, indoors tournaments, other gym and indoor athletic activities. To accomplish this, a couple changes need to be made. First of all, we suggest adding a locker aspect right here to help to both serve the arena as well as the exhibit hall, so more tournaments could be held in the venue and service that, and also add a green room in the arena, and there's room there to do that. We also believe that a stronger private management is encouraged. I know that there's discussion about that. We advocate as a panel doing that because we think it'll accelerate the strengthening the demand calendar enhancements. Secondly, I think there's some improvements that could be added to the venue. We also, so aesthetics, adding a variety of upgrades and art and culture components to the meeting and ballrooms could improve them, but not much more than that's required. Then also improving life safety, lighting, and wayfinding. I think the bold idea for the TCC really relates to how the ineffectiveness of this space we're in today relates to the balance of the TCC. So we would suggest repurposing these meeting rooms into more of a cultural and social space that really lends itself to the theaters adjacent to them and becomes repurposed for those types of uses. We've got some discussion about that. And then here's kind of a setting that could, if you reface the TCC and had it linked to the theaters, I think you could create a completely different environment and animated space out there. So the demand, to accomplish the demand modifications and enhancements, the stewardship at the TCC must improve. Professional management is required, and then revamping Rio Nuevo's capital model for the future. Rio Nuevo, the concept makes a lot of sense. You're importing people from around the entire region, and they're spending money in the TIF district, and they're using that to help fund a regional asset. That makes all the sense in the world. So hopefully that can be continued and enhanced. The campus has issues overall. And we believe that as a panel, redevelopment of the Hotel Arizona site and redevelopment of La Placita site will provide greatest value and help open the site up to the broader environment for the community. And if you take the elevation of Congress, of the Hotel Arizona site to Congress level, I think that changes the whole face of the environment there. And then we've lovingly adopted your term, the Stravenue, and that whole environment of the diagonal road that cuts through, not the road, but the pathway that cuts through the TCC campus can be improved. There's a lot of discussion about that. So, what do we do with the Hotel Arizona site and the La Placita site? The most dramatic thing that can happen is to attract the University of Arizona deeper into the Central Business District. That will have the most profound effect on the downtown area. We think that area lends itself to having a school of design or media or performing arts or visual arts, or even the School of Architecture come to the urban laboratory that is around that environment. The University of Central Florida did that. I'm from Orlando. I've seen this, what it's done to downtown Orlando. They put their center for emerging media in the downtown. Their main campus is 15 miles away. Yours is on the light rail system, or the urban modern streetcar system. Makes a lot of sense. It could really animate and take advantage of the performing arts centers and add the volume to that area. Another proposal has been made to add more exhibit space to serve the gym show. We think a joint venture between the city and the county and that owner of that part of the gym show makes all the sense in the world. We see that being a little different than the TCC's role and being more of a market hall, where you could do flea markets, you could do farmers markets, and you could also do a variety of art and cultural shows in that venue, but it'd be first built for the gym show. And it doesn't have to be an expensive building. It could be you're using tents today for that, and we think an upgraded building could be provided there. It could even be open air. And the Palmer Event Center in Austin, Texas, has something along those lines complementing their convention center. Next, having quality of life introduced to your city for the residents to come is what's going to make that 200 to 300 people want to come here, and maybe even more. So what we have seen as an opportunity for is a neighborhood serving community center that would really add flavor for the west side and the south side neighborhoods, but the whole downtown really. And this is an example of a Croc Center that was built in Salem, Oregon, a relatively small market, but you see the quality that was added to that, and imagine that serving those neighborhoods, the pride that would exude for the community for that. And you could put it right next to the fire station. There, the children will learn respect for the people that are serving them, and also you have built-in security and safety right there. And this shows you the quality here, Here, it's got a gymnasium and a pool and a community rooms. That would be a wonderful addition. And that shows you the quality that was built largely by the non-for-profit community, but supported by the public sector as well. A couple more slides for me. On the west side, we have some real opportunities. I think that, and the panel thinks, that a visitor center, that would be an interpretive center, that really exposes people when they drive on I-10, oh, what's that? And then they can go and look at things that are available in the market. And if you had ample parking and ample bike trails, bike capacity there, they could actually use that as a hub to start their visitation in the central business district. And imagine seeing an Ansel Adams picture in there. Imagine seeing interpretive centers about the Native American and the Mexican culture and heritage here. All those types of things can be teasers that they could start to see in the marketplace. And there are good examples of these around the country, and I think that Tucson has a real opportunity to do something along those lines. And also, because of proximity to the street line, it's a great jumping off point for people to see the community. One last point I think is important, is water is so attractive in this market. I didn't expect rain today either, but we got it. But if the northern part of the arroyo does have water, and if you could extend that down a little bit more, I think you could start touching the wildlife and the indigenous species that were always here, but that are a function of the water.